Greetings and welcome into Recruiting Hot Topics. I'm Channel 2 Sports Director Zach Klein along with Michael Carvell, the recruiting blogger for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It is Thanksgiving week, and that means Georgia and Georgia Tech are playing on the weekend. How much does this outcome of this game impact each school's recruiting efforts, but particularly with the in-state kids?
Well, strangely enough, it will have little or no impact. And you look around at the border states, you've got Alabama, Auburn, South Carolina, Clemson, Florida, Florida State. The outcome of all those rival games could indeed push an in-state kid over the top, but it's just not like that with Georgia and Georgia Tech. And the reason for that is that these two schools hardly ever recruit against each other within the state of Georgia or outside of it.
What do you mean they say they hardly recruit against each other? Because we both know Georgia and Georgia Tech both offer a lot of the same kids scholarships, correct?
Yes, you are correct. They send out initial offers to many of the same recruits. But when it gets down to the nitty-gritty and a local kid is making a final decision between two schools, those two schools are almost never Georgia and Georgia Tech. It just doesn't happen. In fact, I can only think of one kid this year in that situation, only one, and that was Brooks County quarterback Malcolm Parrish, who committed to Georgia over Georgia Tech. But Zach, as you mentioned, in the surrounding states, there's so many more kids picking between the arch rivals, Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Florida State, and so forth. Just not here.
Why is that? Why don't more kids from Georgia have Georgia and Georgia Tech as their finalists? I'm sure many of these kids growing up both watched them countless games on TV, and I'm sure their parents were fans of both programs. Why is that?
Well, that's a long and complicated answer. Some of it has to do with how a recruit fits into a scheme. For example, Georgia Tech runs the triple option on offense, while Georgia has more of a pro-style formation. Some of it has to do with location. Georgia Tech is in the bright lights and big city, while Georgia is in a smaller area. Some of it has to do with academics. Both colleges offer different degrees. But back to football, Zach, some of it has to do with conference affiliation. Georgia Tech is ACC, while Georgia is SEC.
All right, add it all up together, you can see how it makes a little bit of sense. But still, it just seems like 10 or 15 years ago, Georgia and Georgia Tech were always going head-to-head for the in-state kids. What needs to happen for some of us to see more of this in the future, going head-to-head for those final recruits?
Yeah, something that needs to happen has nothing to do with Georgia and Georgia Tech. Believe it or not, conference affiliation does factor into a kid's decision more than you think. And the SEC, of course, has created a dynasty with 7 national titles in a row. Many kids want to be part of that magic, even if they don't play for one of the championship teams. I really think the best thing that could happen is for FSU and Alabama to make it to Pasadena this year, and for FSU to win in a decisive blowout. That would prove to top recruits that you do not have to go to the mighty SEC to win a national championship.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Recruiting Hot Topics. For Michael Carvell, I'm Zach Klein. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.